Friends, Brian here for Yes You Can Play Guitar, and of course, our very special guest as always, a great friend of the channel. Once again, we're going to do another chat session. If you guys have any questions for him at the end or at the end of the video, just comment below for the next session. With the Solitary Adventurer, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing very, very well. I'm in a very pretty part of the world in Scotland on the northwest coast.
Okay.
I feel like I've driven back in time. It's just an exceptionally beautiful place.
Could you give us a little just a little snippet of where you're at?
Yeah, apologies for this, but
Oh,
there you go.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
So you can see my router in the window. We're quite rural here.
Yeah. Well, you know,
Yeah.
I have a saying for Scottish. You know what it is?
Go on.
If it's not Scottish, it's crap.
Well, Mike Myers is Canadian English, isn't he? So that sounded very Mike Myers.
Yeah, I know it's still Canadian. Before we get going, I want to tell everyone, you know, again, not to just as an aside, because we have a lot to talk about with regards to Prince and music and instruments and stuff. Regarding Prince, the past couple weeks have been a bit more busy with family stuff and whatever, and I was was it last weekend? I was in not a remote part of Quebec, but I was quite a ways from home, several hours away from home, and on some family business. And where I was, I got a message from you about we are somewhat movie connoisseurs in our own way. We like to.
I like to think so.
Yeah. So the Solitary Adventure, like it's kind of funny. I've said to some people in our Patreon when we do our group chats here on Zoom, I said, you know, some of our off camera, off recording chats about things other than Prince are just as interesting as well. But we're both really into movies. I'm very fussy about movies. I'm more of the classic movies. I'm a pretty good movie critic in myself, in my own mind anyway. But I get a message from the Solitary Adventurer here in this part of Quebec I'm in. And he says, whatever you do, you got to check out Top Gun Maverick or Top Gun 2, whatever you want to call it. And the timing was great. It was kind of a miserable day weather-wise, and wasn't too far from a cinema. And I went, and it was in French when I watched it. And now, to be fair, I do have a working knowledge of French. You can never be as good as you want to be, but working knowledge. And it blew me away. That movie, absolutely, I couldn't believe it. It's one of those rare instances, and this is my personal opinion, where I would say that the sequel was better than the first movie.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think in about 20 years, it's the best cinema experience I've had. Mm-hmm. I think the last time I've had that much sort of enjoyment in the cinema was probably Pulp Fiction, where you know you're watching something special from about 10 minutes in. Yeah. And you could probably write the script yourself and the story, but the way it's pulled off is just exceptional. And, you know, we're living in a time now where I think we've all grown used to CG and these heroes, you know, smashing each other in the face with a CG bus for 25 minutes with no dialogue. This is a real throwback to how movies used to be in the late 80s, early 90s, and it is a phenomenal film.
So I think what happens too is a lot of in that action genre, it's not that Tom Cruise is overlooked, or a lot of people when they look for the action stuff, they look at, you know, Arnold Schwarzenegger, you know, so what are you doing here? Or
get to the chopper.
Yeah, or Sylvester Stallone, I'm gonna follow, you know. But Tom Cruise, I guess
the last 5 years, I mean, he's almost Jackie Chan territory now, isn't he? Where it shouldn't be humanly possible that a man is willing to risk himself as much as he is. But just phenomenal movies. I know he's not a director, and I know he produces these movies, but to me, he's a master filmmaker now. Like the last couple of Mission Impossibles and this Top Gun, the next level of
oh my brilliance. God, yeah. But you know, some of his movies, like The Last Samurai is definitely my top 10 all-time favorite movies. I do like Japanese culture like that. Like I love the movie Letters from Iwo Jima. But not to get off topic here, but I liked his version of War of the Worlds.
Mhm.
You know, he did so many great movies, but he does his own stunts. The guy is the king of testosterone in his own way. He might not
Yeah.
have 22-inch arms, but he's still the and you know, anyway, I just want to tell everyone that movie blew me away, and I'm
Yeah.
really fussy about movies, and you made some suggestions to me too about we kind of have similar interests in some different things, but I just want to tell everyone out there that I absolutely loved Top Gun 2. I'm going to call it Top Gun 2. I think it's called Top Gun
Yeah.
Maverick, but it blew me away.
Yeah, before we jump to the real reason we're here,
Yeah.
I would say to people, it's been a really strange couple of years in the world.
Yeah.
And this was the first time going into a cinema full where everybody was wrapped by what they were seeing on screen.
Oh,
That kind of felt like the old days. And I think a lot of people will get a lot of sort of good health out of that, if that experience. If they're, previous cinema goers, I would highly recommend that they try it.
you know, and when I got home, I have Firefox with Clint Eastwood on DVD, and I watched it about 3 times. I just did not get the same feeling as Top Gun Maverick 2 with the effects.
Strange that, isn't it? Right, come on, Prince.
Think in Russian. But anyway, as we're going to get into it here, I was looking back through the comments on our previous discussions, and Dr. George Taylor, I love him. I love his posts. Yeah. He's got, man, I'd like to actually have him on sometime.
Yeah.
As I love everybody in the community section, but he has some really good posts, and he said to kind of break down Prince on his instruments, and talk about it a little more. I'll do it. You know, we can do this. I can break down things to the best of my fairly formidable education with guitar anyway. But Prince is an amazing guitar player. If I look at all his techniques, I'll watch for them when he's playing, but the way he his bending, his alternate picking is really crisp. His legato is great. His knowledge of chord voicings, meaning his knowledge of different chord positions along the guitar neck, is fantastic. His right hand strumming, you watch any really good funk guitar players, their right hand's awesome. He is a stellar guitar player. I made a video, as you're very well aware of, a few months ago, of where I would put Prince in the top 100 list. You know, it's hard to know what the criteria is, but as an overall package, like now in my wording, I said he would be at least in the top 15. But overall, we'll get to this a little bit more in a few minutes. Definitely higher, like for the complete package. I mean, he's more likely number 1. But what are your thoughts? Let's just talk about guitar for a second, then we'll move on. But
I agree with you. I think there's so many aspects to guitar playing, and to consider that, he's as good at rhythm guitar as Nile Rodgers, probably better, truth be told. And this is there's a guy who has made a career doing exactly that, and a songwriter and a producer. But he can't sing. Prince can sing, Yes. So once you start taking the layers of what it is to play guitar, acoustic, electric, the styles of play, his versatility is exceptional. And I think he's probably the most versatile of the well-known guitarists on that list.
Yes.
But I mean, there's something about when Prince plays guitar for me where it's not necessarily about the notes, it's the emotion. So someone like Santana playing Europa, just this transcendent experience when you listen to it. But this is Prince every time he picks up a guitar for me. Yeah. It just speaks to me. And he might not be the fastest. He might not, do some of the things that maybe, Hendrix or Santana are renowned for doing. But I can't listen to a full Santana album and get the same experience as Europa on every track. I get that with Prince.
I'm going to say that Prince probably could do everything that they were doing technically. Yeah. But the thing is with Prince, like he's like, he can jump from being an amazing funk guitar player. Funk is one of those styles that I've always appreciated. And I don't know if I told you guys this story, so I'm going to go ahead and tell you guys. I'm going to say 15 or 16 years ago, there was a jazzy funk band in my area, and I wasn't really doing anything at the time. It was a brief window where I was not either self-employed in a band or working for another band, and it wasn't my thing. I was a hard rock shred guy, metal guy. At that time, I was a proficient country player. I'd studied jazz, but I would never call myself a jazz guitar player. Anyway, I got a call from this guy, and I'm going to be brutally honest because people like honesty from my channel. He was very knowledgeable about that funk, jazz type stuff, swing. But he was kind of a, I'll choose my words carefully. Let's just say his personality lacked a lot. Okay. But at the same time, you know, I sat down with him. He showed me, he said, "Hey, would you be interested in trying out for this or whatever?" And I didn't get the gig, and it just wasn't my style. But I learned a lot from this guy. And we were talking about the certain types of like 16th note strumming, doing strumming exercises out of a drum rudiments book for the metronome. I learned a lot from him. I don't know how much I'd be willing to give him that credit, but anyway, but one of the things he said, you're really tight, and he didn't mean tight as in we're tight with the band. He just said your playing's very tight, like you gotta flow with everything. And anyway, I learned a lot from him, but my funk style playing had improved a lot from that, but it was just never my thing. I have a great appreciation for really good funk guitar players, and Prince is just awesome. I'm watching it going, oh my God. Like there's another channel, and they did like a guitar demonstration of some of his techniques, like really good breakdown of his funk stuff, and it was pretty awesome. I was like, man, this is. But anyway, but Prince, he can be a funk guitar player. He could step in with a jazz band. He could play in a blues band, and then also he could step in with a metal band. You know, there's like, you know, he could, you know, if he wanted to, he could have played lead guitar for Guns N' Roses. Like he was that good and all around player for sure. I want to apologize to everyone out there. Where I'm living, the road has been ripped up. They've been working on the water pipage for about 6 weeks, and last week we hardly saw any of the workers, and they've just shown up since you and I have started this, and I can hear the beeping and everything. So if there's a little bit of background noise, there's something I like to refer to as the laws of coincidence. Have you ever done that? You're driving, right? And yes. You're driving down like a road with like miles, right? And you have to make a left turn, and someone happens to be walking right where you need to turn, and you're like, out of anywhere on this road they could be at the second, they're right where I'm turning. I do that all the time. I'm kind of weird like that. But so the laws of coincidence, they happen to show up right when you and I started our Zoom chat, and they're out there working. So anyway,
so the guitar, if we say that's his strongest instrument, and I don't think anyone would argue with them, I think the next on the list is bass for me, in terms of his proficiency. At that point, I think we leave the realms of, could he have a career if all he did was play that instrument? So he could have been the greatest session guitarist in the business. He could have been one of the top bass session players. I don't think you could say the same about his piano ability. I think he's a marvelously, he called himself a colorist, was the term that he used. He used the piano to augment what he was doing vocally.
Yeah.
I think he's a really exceptional talent that he can play piano the way that he does.
Yeah.
But I don't think he'd earn a living doing it. You know, I mean, you put him next to someone like Billy Joel, where they've come from this classical background and things. I think his technique suddenly starts getting found to be a little bit lacking in some areas, and he doesn't have that versatility that obviously he had with the guitar playing and the bass. You know,
well, just speaking with the bass for a second, I'd seen, one of the popular requests was when he play that funky music, and that was great, and he played the bass, and that was good. But what really blew me away was some of the clips, him recording some of the Batman music playing bass, like his slap and pop technique. I'm going, oh my God, like he's up there, man. It blew me away. I'm like, holy Jesus. Yeah, he's definitely a phenomenal bass player. When you say that the guitar was his best instrument, I'm going to throw this in. one of the things on my journey with this whole Prince thing is his vocals are pretty amazing. Like, it seems like every song or every few songs that I do a reaction video to, he's always throwing in like little curveballs. But with his vocals, I've heard him sing different styles. I think I did one last week where I'm like, I haven't quite heard him sing like that. I would almost be tempted to say that his vocals might be his best instrument, or it in guitar, where he's an extremely talented vocalist. And I'm watching this guy. I started to even calling myself a singer in the same discussion as Prince is embarrassing. But later on in life, and I co-fronted some 3-piece bands, and I was barely average at best on vocals. But to watch him, when they did the ride, it was at Bagley's, that three-piece. If you want to see a naked band, watch a 3-piece band. But his vocals, his guitar playing, melodically, there's a lot on the guitar player, because you got to really help fill out the sound melodically, and rhythmically, the bass and the drums are doing their thing. It just blew me away that just to have that ability to sing, play guitar like that, but also be able to go out and sing, and it's amazing. Like, no wonder the guy's so confident.
Yeah, I mean, his range was enormous, for a male vocal. If you speak to people who are casual Prince fans, of course, they think he only sang in falsetto. And I don't think he did himself any favors with the choice of singles that he put out, to chart, because they did tend to be ballads, particularly, once Purple Rain had passed.
Yeah.
And there is something about his voice that kind of, is it the most unique? The way when you hear Whitney Houston sing, instantly it's Whitney.
Yeah.
Same with Aretha.
Yeah.
I don't know if Prince has that level of uniqueness to his voice across his entire range. I think he's considered unique and identifiable because of the falsetto, in the way that it's almost like Smokey Robinson, right? It's like there's only a few guys who can hit those high notes. But I don't know, there's a little something in there where I think he's amazingly versatile as a vocalist.
Yes, that's a great word.
I don't think the character of his voice is exceptional in the way that maybe like Stevie Wonder, one of these sort of defining voices, or Marvin Gaye.
I don't know, man. He was really good. That's a really, I don't know, and I'm still learning, right? Like this has been at least half a year process, if not longer, for me, and I'm still learning. And he's such an interesting character. But I don't know, man. His vocals were, it was a song "I Love You But I Can't Trust You." That song blew me away. I'm like, oh my god! Like I had no idea. I don't know. His vocals are up there. It's we'll let the people. What do the people think? They can comment.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing with any opinion about Prince, isn't it? That I've never really known a fan community where we can all have a different take on it.
Yeah.
But we all stand shoulder to shoulder, pointing at the guy saying he's the best of all time. He's the genius.
Yes.
And my only thing with the vocal side is just it never wavered. His ability never left him right up until the end, his final gig.
And for people that aren't musicians out there, normally what happens, and this is, as we age, you'll see there's a lot of famous male vocalists out there. Their vocal range starts to tighten up or get a little more limited as we age. Our body changes. That's just
as Billy Joel puts it, if he sings a song in the original key, he has to let his sound guy know to change the piano.
Yes.
Because all of his songs have come down, a few notes.
Yeah. And
whereas
what happened?
Prince was singing everything in the original key till the end. Amazing.
Well, yeah. And what happens for a lot of people, the way like the guitar is tuned, it's called the standard tuning. Okay. EAD-GBE. A lot of bands will tune a half step down where each string is tuned to the note before that in the chromatic scale. Why a lot of rock bands do that, sounds a little heavier, but it's also much easier for the vocalist to sing. They don't have to go, as they're touring and playing every night, You don't have to go up quite as high. Some bands, as like, I think it might have been Genesis. Don't, you know, kill me here, guys. But Genesis, I think they even tuned down a whole step now, or at least I had their DVD When in Rome from 2007. They were really tuned down. I could hear at least a whole. I'm pretty sure a whole step. Just it's that much easier for Phil Collins. You know, he's getting older. Like your body changes. You know, like I had a day yesterday out with the weed whacker, weed eater, and for about 4 hours. And last night I'm like, yeah, I'm not 25 anymore.
I mean, the one for me where you can really you can hear age on the voice is John Bon Jovi. You know, a guy who had a really high voice. Like you try singing "Living on a Prayer," and you know you've got to start putting parts of your body in a clamp to get that high.
Yeah.
Now, not completely.
And for people, like he's fodder right now for a lot of reaction video channels because he's really struggling. And but that's and so to finish up with the tuning, I don't know if I've really heard Prince tuned down. I think he's still, to my recollection, he was tuned to A440 or standard tuning for pretty much all the material I've seen, even with Third Eye Girl. I could be wrong, but I'd have to really listen to it again. But I think like his abilities just never seem to leave him, right?
Yeah. And just to finish off on the instrument, the thought that's just gone through my mind is the drums.
Yeah.
An instrument that I think he was really strong in his early days on.
Yeah.
And I think it weakened throughout his career, which that's going to raise a few eyebrows and people are going to want to jump on me straight away. But I honestly would say that there's very little evidence of Prince playing exceptional drums in the final 20 years of his career, because I think it was the one instrument where he was hiring guys who were far more capable than him. You know, Michael Bland, John Blackwell,
Yes.
you know, Hannah is an incredibly versatile drummer.
Yeah.
I think it was an instrument where he didn't kick them off the stool and take over. Whereas all the other instruments, you know, he was the studio guy for them. The drumming, to me, there's no real evidence in that last 20 years of him being an exceptional drummer. It didn't follow the trajectory where he got better on each instrument over the years.
So here's the thing with that. With drums, from my opinion, drums is very physical. Like your body's actively involved in playing that, and a lot of the drummers they have to keep up with it with the training. It's not something that you can just not do for 6 months and go right out in front of 70,000 people and just go and just that I think in some ways that would be more demanding than some of the other instruments keeping up, because it's so physical. You're using all your limbs, you're playing. It's like with guitar, like I've often said when I started to realize like how proficient Prince was on these different instruments. For example, again, I don't like mentioning myself in the same discussion as Prince, but I was a very technically sound guitar player. I didn't pick up a guitar for 2 years. I had a burnout period. When I picked it up, that first day or two was a little awkward. But then as I got into my routine again, it all came back really quickly. So the guitar, you can, if he didn't pick up a guitar for a while, he could probably just practice for an hour or two, and then depending on how long you put the guitar down. Drums, I don't know. Drums are and that's another one that suffers with age. Like a lot of, well, let's talk about Phil Collins. Phil Collins, if you look at Phil Collins in the early Genesis days, if you look at him after Peter Gabriel left, he still played the drums in the recordings for Trick of the Tail, When in Wuthering, and then there were 3. He hired Chester Thompson. I think Bill Bruford came along. But as he aged, I even have the DVD for When in Rome 2007, and he just kind of shows up late to their first rehearsals. They have this really awesome rehearsal place, I think in New York. He hadn't been practicing, and he was really off on the kit. And Daryl Sturmer, who was their touring guitar player, bass player, amazing musician himself, he just said, well, Chester and I, we practice all the time, so we're ready to go. If you're not practicing, he's trying to be polite because he's talking about his boss. He said, if you're not practicing, it's like, So I would say when I would watch Prince with all these instruments, say like, do people understand the time he would have to do to, you know, maintain his chops and maintain his technique, right? You're mentioning the piano. Um, I want to say too, on drums, the videos I've seen, he's good. He's good, but you know, I definitely wouldn't put him on the level of, you know, drummers mentioned Blackwell and Bland for sure. He was good. Like, I mean, he kicked my ass on the drum kit any day. But with piano, I think you made some good points about that. He's still a very technically proficient piano player. Like when I'd watch him and he'd do some of the runs on the key, like there's no doubt that he spent time, you know, working on his technique with a metronome, getting it up to speed at different points in his career or whatever. But for me, I just, I'm still bedazzled that someone can be that proficient doing so much.
And that's at the end of the day, that's where it comes down to, doesn't it? That, you know, we all sit here, you know, in this vantage point saying, oh, okay, well, he's 8 out of 10 here, he's 7 out of 10, 10 out of 10 here. But it's one individual.
Yeah.
It's unknown throughout music for someone to be that good on so many things.
Yeah.
I know there's others like, you know, Todd Rundgren and people like this that people will, you know, Zappa, who people will point to. But I think he was a truly special person in the sense that, you know, as a songwriter, engineer, producer, all of these things, as well as the performer. And the fact that his performance was so good to the point where he didn't even have to play an instrument. In truth, as a performer, he would have had a worldwide audience.
Yeah.
But the fact that, you know, has this truly one-man band, he's not relying on a Quincy Jones. He's not relying on a John Landau. You know, this is a guy who, if anything, actually pushes away on a big name.
Yeah.
You know, there's no famous duets with Whitney Houston or, you know, anything like that. He literally just said, look, I'll stand on my own merit. And he did. He stood above everyone.
So one of the things are, and I'm going to talk to all the musicians out there because it was something it took me a long time to learn. I wish I could have all these videos and all this stuff now about Prince playing and his performing. I wish I could have had that in my teenage years to watch or in my 20s as an education, because one of the points that, you know, one of the things about music that a lot of people don't get, even musicians, is that it's still a performance. So I could make some names of some tremendous shred guitar players with the most insane technique. Okay. But if they were just playing to a mass audience, it's not translating because they're very boring to watch, unless you're a guitar head, right? They might have 100 guitar heads at their gig. But one of the things that tied everything together for Prince was his stage presence and his command of the audience, right? And that was amazing to see as well. Like, and that's why, you know, when I'll see people and they're like, I'll see students and I'll explain to them too. I'll say, you know, you are performing. Like, don't forget that you are performing. Like, you have to. It's kind of like trying to answer the comment section on a YouTube channel. These are human beings giving you their time and attention. You have to put on a performance, right? Romeo and Juliet. If we went to the Shakespeare Theater, right, and people were saying, Romeo, Romeo, Juliet, how I love you. That's not what people want to see. They want to see like, Juliet, I love you. Da, 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 da. A lot of musicians don't get that. And I say to everyone, I say, hey, go out to your local pub, tavern, club that has music. Watch your local band. If they're great musicians, that's great. If their sound's great, that's great. But what's their performance like? Are they boring to watch? You know, that's one of the things, the key things that Prince had with tying all his talent together, of course. And he also had the songwriting ability as well.
Yeah, and I think the thing that made him exceptional from a performance point of view was that go on YouTube and find some of the rehearsal footage that leaked.
Yeah,
you know, and it's usually mid 80s, the sort of revolution period. But he's given it everything in those rehearsals in an empty room, not an audience, in front of a mirror, because he wants to know what the audience is seeing.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, I know people who've been in a 20-person audience at Paisley Park, and he played like it was 20,000. He never halved it. He never half-arsed the effort. And I think that's exceptional. You know, for a guy who could have phoned it in a dozen times, give us one good show, and everyone would still say, yeah, it's the best of all time. But the fact that regardless of the size of the audience, and whether it's rehearsal, sound check, or the actual gig, or an after party, the guy just delivered. And I think once you witness that, and you realize, and you go down the rabbit hole of bootlegs and things like this, that's when he starts, you know, becoming unique. And there is nobody else who ever compared to that.
One of the things from Purple Rain that always stuck with me is there's a scene with Morris Day. He's going in, and I don't know if they're trying out new dancers or whatever, but they have this amazing rehearsal space, huge, and they have the big PA, the big sound system and everything, and like they're playing like they're putting on a show. It's really, and in another way, it was very educational watching that movie, because again, I think I've said this in previous videos, but like, so I was just saying about in Purple Rain, like with Morris Day and the time there when the rehearsal hall, I was like, oh my God, like it was really interesting. And I've said this again, you know, my personal feeling is that someone pulled Prince aside when he was very young and said, kid, you want to be a great musician and a great songwriter, but a big part of it is a performance. I think you might have referenced maybe Sonny T was the guy that kind of did that with him, maybe, possibly. That's my gut feeling. He didn't. Someone told him. Someone said, "Hey, focus on your performance."
I think we've spoke about this before. I don't know who that mentor is. I know plenty of people are going to say Sonny T. And certainly Sonny was a big influence on Prince as a musician. I think it comes out of the Battle of the Bands. That they were all local musicians. Now you've got to remember, Prince's father is a musician. His mother's a singer. Andre Simone is, you know, for all intents and purposes, best friend, brother. His dad is in a band. Performing music is in their blood, you know? So, you know, could they stand there and have absolutely zero personality? I think the early Prince, yes. You know, at 14 years old, he played with his back to the crowd because he was so shy. Now, I don't know where the mindset happens, where it suddenly kicks into gear and he suddenly becomes effervescent on stage. But if you go watch Dirty Mind tour, Controversy tour, I would argue that's not a really interesting Prince. It's a limited set of moves. It's a little bit Mick Jaggery. Even the one that's just been released now, the Purple Rain tour, it's only the start of him getting good in front of an audience, where, you know, this God, performing God, is born. He peaks, you know, a couple of years later with Sign of the Times, Love Sexy, that sort of era in terms of performance. But it's not like he came out the womb this amazing performer. You know, I think it was a learning curve for him.
And now this is just me saying this too. I just think someone or a few people probably when he was young kind of pulled him aside and said, dude, it's all about the show, my friend. It's all about the show. And he had it all in spades. But do you want to switch gears and let's talk about Paisley Park a little bit?
Yeah, there was a question from Mike about, I think, a comment that I'd made. Yeah.
Mike Machete, good friend of ours on Patreon. And always has tremendous questions, insights. And so what was Mike's question again? He was talking about...
Yeah, so I think I'd use the phrase that I saw Paisley Park as the jewel in Prince's legacy. And I think he wanted me to sort of delve on that and maybe explain why I like that. So, yeah, so where I was coming from when I said that is Paisley Park is such a monumental ambition. Like, who does that? Who builds, you know, how many film directors build their own studio? You know, there's probably Tyler Perry is about the only one these days. Francis Ford Coppola did it in the 70s with a place called Zoetrope, which I believe is what Prince was going for. It was Earth, Wind and Fire had a rehearsal space dedicated that they would record at, and Francis Ford Coppola had his own film production place in San Francisco. And if you combine the two of them, you can see where the seed comes from, where Prince decides, you know, I'm buying these rehearsal spaces warehouses and what have you for the band. But I want everything. I want my own Sunset Sound studio. I want my own dedicated rehearsal space. I want living quarters. So if I'm really in the flow, I don't have to get in the car and drive home. I can just go upstairs and sleep. And it's a remarkable place. I can't really tell you, if all you see are photographs from the outside, it's an interesting looking building.
Yeah.
But for a man to dream that up, have the wealth to be able to carry it off, to do it, and then to actually, for the rest of his life, have the benefit of it. I just think it's the most impressive ambition I've ever seen in a person.
Yes.
And that's why I think it's the jewel of his legacy. Now, I'm going to completely flip here and say, I actually don't think it did the music the best benefit, because suddenly he could spend 15, 16, 20 hours working on a song that maybe at Sunset Sound he would have said, let's push it, let's move on to the next track. And I think there's periods of overproduction that Paisley allowed him to do that I think were probably a little bit detrimental to the music. That's not to say that he stopped writing great songs and the great albums that came out of Paisley. And sadly, it kind of coincides with the end of that period where he just couldn't put a foot wrong. For 6 or 7 albums there, he was just on a tear. At some point, that always runs out. It ran out for Stevie Wonder. It runs out for everyone who has that purple patch, for want of a better phrase.
Yes.
I don't know whether Paisley caused the end of the purple patch, or whether that had happened anyway, and Paisley just happens to coincide timing-wise.
I got a couple of just kind of off the cuff questions about Paisley Park for you. So now sometimes you and I will discuss things and you'll tell me things. Sometimes I'll read different things in the comments and I get easily confused, but he would put on shows there for people that were part of the Prince fan club.
He would just put on shows. So he would basically, he would just put shows on. He wanted to play. He was a night owl, so 2 a.m. was like 8 at night for him.
Mm-hmm.
So he would just turn the light on, and anyone passing by knew that Paisley was open for business. He would take a small cover charge at the door, and that would usually be given to charity, from what we're led to believe.
Mm-hmm.
But I think he just liked to play for an audience, and he wanted to play all the time anyway. So why not do it for a select bunch? Now, there were more formal things that he did over time. So around 2000, there was a thing called the Celebration, where he actually went out to the fan community and said, I'm going to have a week-long thing at Paisley where you can all come. You can see the studios. We'll have discussions about, life and religion, at the time. And I'll play a gig every day. So for 7 nights, I think 4 or 5 of the gigs were actually at one of the stadiums in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area.
Okay.
So just a phenomenal thing that, I look back now and I think I really should have pushed the boat out and done a lot of things different in my life and got myself out there, because it's a real highlight.
Yeah.
But honestly, there are people who have seen Prince like 200 times because they just went to Paisley every Friday and Saturday night. Amazing.
How do you feel about, I want to choose my words carefully here, Paisley Park, like handling his estate, his legacy? How do you think all that has, in your opinion? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, all of this is my opinion, right? It's not like I'm the definitive word on any of this. I'm just, willing to speak. It's a real mixed bag. So let's go right to the beginning of what happens once he dies. There's no will. There's a massive undertaking with court cases and things like that to work out how many heirs are there. It comes down to 6. So there's one full-blood sibling, Taika. Then there's Norrin, Sharon, John R., Omar, and Alfred, who are half siblings. Of the 6 of them, 2 have now passed. One, I don't know where his 16%, 1 in 6 share went. 2 have sold to a company called Primary Wave. Now, we'll come back to that in just a second. Taika has sold, I believe, 90% of her stake. So now you've got 1 unknown share, and you've got probably two siblings with their full share left. The rest of it is owned by this Primary Wave company. Now, I mean, I'm from a financial background, so I don't want to go off on a big tangent here, but I think it's important that we kind of spell out what this company is. So we live in a time where you can basically borrow, as a company, you can borrow as much money as you want, and you pay hardly any interest, like 1%. So some bright spark had the idea that if you've got a song that is famous and has been famous for 30, 40 years, and people still want to put it on the radio, those royalties are almost like a bond. That income stream is never going to go away. No one's suddenly going to stop listening to Purple Rain. So if we can borrow at 1%, and we know that the royalties, that the back catalogue of this person is going to give us more than 1% as a return through income streams, putting it in movies, all of these things, why don't we just borrow as much money as we can and buy up people's back catalogues? Now, if you're one of Prince's heirs, you've got a court case that's taken a long time. You've got an IRS case about the tax bill that is struggling to be settled. And you're in your 60s or 70s. So if someone comes to you and says, I'll give you, I don't know, 10 million, $20 million for your inheritance, your 1/6 of his estate, you don't really know what that's valued at, but you know that a bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush, right? So you take the money and you can then bequeath it to your family, or you can, go on that luxury cruise that you always wanted to go on. So people are taking the money. Bruce Springsteen recently sold his catalog for $500 million. Now, this is a guy who's, spent his entire life building this back catalog up.
Should we start a GoFundMe for him?
Yeah, for fuel for his jet. But you have to look and think, why are people doing this? And the future of music is very uncertain. But a company will last far longer than any person can live.
Yes.
That Primary Wave company is still going to be around in 200 years. And it'll be on its 42nd CEO by that time. But they'll still be collecting royalties on Purple Rain.
Yeah.
Now, they've got about 40-something%. By my calculation, I put them at 48% of his estate. The media says it's 42, but considering they own 2.9 of the 6 as holdings, I put it at 48%. If they get to 51, that has major implications because they don't need permission for any of their business decisions.
Majority holder, right?
Exactly. At the moment, at least the 2 heirs who are sort of, holding out and holding on to their share, at least their voice needs to be heard. Yeah. Once they get to 51, already we're seeing Let's Go Crazy popping up on every advert, for tampons, wherever it might be. It's going to get crazy when they own 51%. Yeah. And then suddenly his music's going to get used in a way that he never would have condoned when he was alive.
Yeah.
Now, this is the point that most fans make. Prince wouldn't have done that. Prince wouldn't like that. Prince should have left a will. And then none of this would be an issue. If there was a charitable foundation set up with clear guidelines, with the money bequeathed into the charity, everyone would have been happy that, it's in keeping with his beliefs when he was alive. Yeah. But for whatever reason, he just didn't do that. People, have spoken, his manager from 2010. She said, I tried to convince him, you need a will. You're a legend, you need a will. He wouldn't have talk of death. He wouldn't do a will. So it's a real predicament that we're in now, that you've got a company that has the majority shareholder. You've got two heirs who have basically washed their hands of it and just taken the money. A couple of heirs have passed away. One whose share we don't know where that is, but that could be quite crucial in that if Primary Wave find out who it went to, maybe they buy it off them. And we've got Paisley Park operating as a museum in a really awkward part of the country to get to. It's not like Memphis and Graceland.
And you know, I'm good. I just want to bring up this one point. I had a hope. I plan on going to Paisley Park spring of next year. I did have a little hope getting there in the fall of this year, but the price of fuel right now, you know, I could hitchhike, but apparently hitchhiking is dangerous. I wouldn't pick me up if I was standing on the side of the road anyway. But yeah, I hear what you're saying about Paisley Park with it being hard to get to.
Now it's actually open this week. They're doing a celebration because it's the annual thing that has started since he passed away. So it's open. People are over there at the moment. They've got guest speakers from, you know, the Prince alumni world.
Yeah.
Jill Jones, who was, you know, the female voice on a lot of the songs that you hear from the 80s. Quite often sort of not credited properly because she was ghost vocaling for, you know, a lot of those. I mean, these are people that you want to hear, and it is the Mecca. You know, Paisley Park is the place that there's only one way that you can show how much of a genius Prince was.
Yeah.
And how he differs from all these other artists, and that's go show them Paisley. Because I've been to Graceland, but Graceland's a home. You know, it shows that Elvis is a nice guy, but it doesn't show that he's a master musician.
No.
The less said about Michael Jackson's Neverland, the better.
Yeah.
But Prince's Paisley Park is a testimony to this is a working man. This is a musician. Absolutely. And he built his own playground so that he could output his music as much as possible. And I just think it's a remarkable achievement that he did.
Absolutely. Well, let's we'll cap it there for this discussion. We're going to do what's called our Patreon after show, where we invite some what I call Patreonies, our good friends. They come on, we chat about all kinds of stuff. Not just
can just before you wrap up,
yeah,
I need to just I just need to nail this one on the head. I think there's a real problem that all we ever think of is Purple Rain Prince. Mm-hmm. And the majority of posthumous releases are from that period. Now, this speaks to Primary Wave. They're a money-making business. They're a company. They need profit. It is quite clearly the era that they can make the most money because it's got a film, it's got a #1 album. The downside for me is I don't think Purple Rain is really watchable these days, given the treatment of women, the things that are happening in that movie. I don't think it's going to capture a new audience the way it captured us, because we were from a different time.
Yeah,
I think the Prince image is becoming problematic if all you do is keep waving this 25-year-old kid around with a purple trench coat on.
Yeah,
and it also limits, because all we're getting is concerts from Purple Rain here. There's 30 years of music after that can't be in those concerts because he hadn't written it yet. I think the Prince of 2010, 2012, before he starts aging quite visibly towards the end, I think while you've got that level of performer, someone like the Prince of Coachella, I think that's where the image should be going to, because that image is timeless.
Yeah,
there's a guy at the peak of his abilities. He's got this massive catalog that he's dipping into. I think that's a real problem with the estate, with Primary Wave, in my eyes, my opinion. I think that they're creating an image of Prince that won't last 50 years if they keep pushing the Purple Rain.
Absolutely. Well, it's the construction people that are out the door now. Just let this be. This has been 6 or 7 weeks now. Anyway, absolutely a pleasure. We'll do this once again. And so remember, folks, practice hard, but practice smart. We'll see you soon.